And I don't usually like to do it this way, and I'm not a fan when others do it, but I get it. My particular background being a product of a brief, loving relationship and marriage between a Black man and a European descended Jew, Jewish woman. Uh, my mother, who raised me with a certain set of, I think, positive mythologies around all of this and pushed me to a certain political trajectory. A correct one, by the way, one that I think both Black and Jewish communities miss out on, quite frankly. Something I'll come back to a little bit here this morning as well. But because of that, and because of the particular approach that I've been encouraged toward in studying the histories of these communities and their actual and honest relationship, my parents notwithstanding, it's frustrating when this kind of stuff happens, and especially when I know that this is the goal. We want uninformed discussion just in general, with smatterings of truth that can be easily played upon, preyed upon, and manipulated. So let me just say, again, number one, popular discussions of Israel, Jews, Black Jewish relations, etc., just like all other issues, particularly those related to struggles for power, are intentionally narrowed, limited, framed to support, are intentionally narrowed or limited and framed to support the broader colonial project. Again, check all my other work for that. Number two, there is no genuine interest in investigating the origins of stereotypes or why celebrities both exist and are then often encouraged to speak on matters beyond their art, talent, or expertise. Third point, into this vacuum, and I'm going to come to this, comes the Anti-Defamation League, or ADL, which can establish the dominant conservative narrative against which all else must submit. So I know that sounds like and maybe is a sharp segue or shift, but I'm going to come to that in a minute, because I think a lot of the response that we get and a lot of the discussion is driven around a very prescribed political narrative set and protected by the ADL. And then lastly, but the histories behind why all of this is less about Jews and more about European imperialism gets lost. The differences between Judaism and Zionism get lost, and the theft all of this is meant to mask goes undiscussed. Whatever we think of our own identity or the identity of others or our own people's behavior or those of others, we have to also recognize that beyond our own views are the views that others have and the way others use or attempt to misuse the behavior and perspectives of different groups for their own political purposes. So we already can point to, for instance, with all the nonsense about Kanye being an anti-Semite, we can point to some broader context in history for how claims of anti-Semitism are meant to play politically. It's one thing to be critical of what Kanye's had to say. It's one thing not to like what Kanye's had to say. It's one thing to be defensive about what Kanye has had to say. It's another to not understand the differences between an angry Black celebrity and organized state power to commit genocide or suppress a group of people. So this idea that Kanye is in league with or representative of or capable of or powerful enough to enact some anti-Semitic power over Jews is part of the mythology. To misunderstand or not understand at all how claims of anti-Semitism are used as a defense of conservative right-wing politics, colonialist politics, Zionist politics is, again, to be confused about and to be missing the point about how attacks of even Kanye are being used. Again, I'm going to come back to keep coming to this. So I just want to share a little bit of this great documentary, Occupation of the Mind, for this quick, brief, just this short section on how the state of Israel, now I know this is not exactly the same, but how the state of Israel brought in Frank Luntz and other popular marketing, advertising, psychological warfare experts to rebrand their politics in the world. All right. And I think it adds an important context to understanding what's happening now in the discussion and the critique and the misinterpretation, many of them misinterpretations around what Kanye West is saying.
2 years after the Lebanon invasion, the American Jewish Congress sponsored a conference in Jerusalem to devise a formal public relations strategy known in Hebrew as Hasbara. Participants included PR and advertising executives, media specialists, journalists, and leaders of major Jewish groups. According to a brochure from the Congress, no single event brought home the need for a more effective Hasbara or information program more persuasively than the 1982 war in Lebanon and the events that followed. As one conference participant put it, Israel is no longer perceived to be Little David, but Goliath steamrolling across the map. The primary aim of the conference was to develop strategies to spin unpopular Israeli policies and to counter negative press coverage by shaping the media frame in advance. News doesn't just jump into a camera, a conference delegate said. It's directed, it's managed, it's made accessible. Israel-based advertising executive Martin Fenton would put it in even more blunt terms. Propaganda is not a dirty word, he said. Face it, we are in the game of changing people's minds, of making them think differently. To accomplish that, we need propaganda. The conference was chaired by US advertising executive Carl Spielvogel, the legendary ad man who created the highly acclaimed Miller Lite beer ads in the 1970s.
The choice of Spielvogel makes perfect sense. He's known as a master of image inversion and rebranding. The ad man responsible for transforming Miller Lite, which had been viewed before as a woman's beer, into a manly beer that tough guys would drink.
The best part is that it tastes so great.
The best part is it's less filling.
Nah, it tastes great.
Less filling.
His job with Israel would require the same kind of rebranding, only in the opposite direction, to help soften the image of a country that's coming to be seen as a bully. So he recommends creating a cabinet post dedicated exclusively to explaining policy, whose job would not be setting policy, but presenting it in the most attractive way to the rest of the world.
So again, I'm not arguing that there is a one-to-one connection or even certainly no cause and effect. I'm just saying there's a parallel between the broader colonialist mission of the West, and in this case of Zionism and the state of Israel, and this idea that criticism of what Jews in power or the state of Israel do is in and of itself anti-Semitic. I then also think that there would be need to be more discussion, again, as I sort of alluded to, around the differences between, again, angry, even hateful comments and organized institutional state power that can act on those hateful comments. Again, I don't think it's too far afield from, can Black people be racist? Can Black people be anti-Semitic? I think given the conditions and the history of Black people, no. And we would need to look a little bit more carefully at what is being said, advocated, and then again, what power is in place to act on any of those views.